scheduled agenda for Monday, August 9th, 2021. Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmembers Huff.
Here.
Perkins.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
DeLucy.
Here.
Steinmeier.
Here.
Hobart.
Here.
Mayor Ware.
Here. We do have a citizen request to speak to the council tonight. This is a non-resident, so I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules of order to allow for the speaker this evening.
Second.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules.
Councilmembers Huff.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
DeLucy.
Yes.
Steinmeier.
Yes.
Hobart.
Yes.
Mayor Ware.
Yes. So our speaker this evening is Chris Fairbank, who wishes to speak to the council regarding IFD sales tax. If you would please come to the podium and just state your name for the record.
Chris Fairbank. Sorry. Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager, thank you for letting me speak to you this evening. My name is Chris Fairbank. I am president of IFF Local 781, Professional Firefighters Independence. I'm here representing the 157 members of the Independence Fire Department. I represent these 157 members who serve this city admirably for 365 days a year. I'm here to address the concern and need for this council to find methods to fund the fire department. Independence firefighters responded to almost 23,400 alarms alone last year, or an increase of nearly 33% since 2009. Going back to 1991, at point we ran 6,400 alarms with 195 firefighters. So in the course of 20 years, we've increased our call volume fourfold and have decreased our staffing. Additionally, if you look at cities close to us, including Columbia, Missouri, and Lee Summit, Missouri, you'll find that in those jurisdictions, if a population of Columbia has a population of 125,000, 5,000 more than we do, and they're running 10,000 or 12,900 alarms. Lee Summit has a population of 115,000 and only running 10,000 alarms. As you can see, we're running twice as many as these cities are. Additionally, our current infrastructure and equipment has fallen behind. We currently have 10 stations, of which 5 are in desperate need of repair or replacement. Our reserve fleet and apparatus have been depleted to a state of disrepair, to the point we are one issue away from being unable to provide an apparatus for companies to respond on when other apparatus are being repaired. Namely, we have one apparatus in our fleet right now that can't make right turns. I think this council can agree that that is an issue or concern when we're responding to emergency to the citizens here in Independence. We believe Chief Short has clearly defined what the department needs to fulfill its mission and responsibility to the citizens. Increase staffing to meet our year-over-year growth in the alarms and reduce firefighter fatigue by establishing an additional fire company and adding to the response matrix. It's time to repair or replace stations that have long outgrown their use and supply the department with the tools they need to do the job and for the job they are tasked with. The term public safety is important. The term public safety and importance are used by the members of this council quite often. Unfortunately, it seems that the fire department is not part of that mission. The overriding theme seems to be that the fire department is to do more with less. There is an option to correct these measures, and that sits with the council. The entire council needs to recommend and support the sales tax or fund the department appropriately through the general fund and make it a model for other cities to follow. Anything less jeopardizes the citizens of Independence and the firefighters that respond to those calls. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens who wish to address the council this evening? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to our ordinance. Madam City Clerk.
Bill number 21-057, an ordinance amending the city's current use tax to allow funding to be utilized for all police department personnel and equipment, and providing for submission of the proposal to the qualified voters of the city for their approval at the special election called and to be held in the city on November 2nd, 2021, and proposing the form of the ballots to to be employed at said election and directing the city clerk to do all things called for by law in connection with holding of said election.
Okay, I do have some questions regarding this ordinance and the proposed ballot language that I'd like to address to the sponsors of this bill. In the 5th paragraph, which reads, whereas once the funding needs related to the animal shelter and to police department personnel and equipment are met, the remainder of the local use tax shall flow into city funds in the same manner as the city's local sales tax is allocated. I think what is missing from this paragraph is a definition of when the animal shelter and police department needs are met. In the Prop P language that was set at $3 million for the police department and $750 for the animal shelter, the tax is split evenly 50-50 between those two needs, but it outlines specifically at what point the remainder funds would flow into the general fund and the other special taxing funds. And this seems it could be interpreted as being very open-ended, that all of the money would go to the animal shelter and police department. So that's my question, is how we can clear that up.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, as always, as we're working through these different issues and stuff, sometimes a little house cleaning and retooling is appropriate. So I agree with that. After looking at paragraph 5, that we should amend that. So I'll make the motion to amend the ordinance to make clear the police portion of use is capped at $4 million and keep the same 2.5% CPI as already approved. So that would increase $1 million. And I would refer to the city manager for a little clarification on why we're doing this.
I'm sorry, Councilman Perkins, why don't we have a second on your motion to amend before we have discussion? You don't have any sound there.
Second. I'll second. I'll second it, Madam Mayor.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. City Manager.
That's one way to get me quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, as Councilmember Perkins alluded to, when the voters of Independence approved this tax back in August of 2019, they did so with a couple of provisions in place. One of those with that the use tax would be capped at $750,000 for the animal shelter services, and then the cost of hiring 30 net new police officers. Staff estimated the cost of hiring those officers, which at the time our math included fully equipping those officers, at $3 million. Now, since that time, we've had some input and clarification, for example, from our Public Safety Oversight Committee, that the language was not specific enough to allow for using these funds for equipment, which is in part addressed by the proposed ordinance, and was also recommended by the Public Safety Committee last Friday. Why this ordinance is coming forward, as the council knows, we've had these conversations with our Fraternal Order of Police, which represents our police officers and sergeants in this city. We are, like many cities, having a difficult time recruiting and retaining new officers into the city. So those 30 net new positions that were funded by the voters, we're having a difficult time filling those. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 of those positions being vacant, so 10 of the original plus 30 additional ones now. So the concept would be to provide additional funding, which, Prop P is far exceeding. We thought it would, begin to waterfall to the other sales tax funds in 2039. It started doing that last year, so beat our expectations by, 19 years. The $1 million is the amount that we think would give us an appropriate boost to help recruit, to be, as a metropolitan city, We compete with neighbors all over this metro area for police talent. We think that would help get us toward the top of market and give us a very competitive edge when it comes to recruitment. And then, of course, the 2.5% CPI will ensure that there's sustainable funding resources to keep up with wage adjustments moving forward as those go. So I think to your point, Mayor, having a cap so that those other sales tax funds can do some budgetary planning and know what's coming their way is a good thing. But we believe the staff gives us the amount to make meaningful impact with those wages and benefits.
Okay, are there questions on, or discussion on the motion to amend paragraph number 5?
Madam Mayor, it's DeLucci.
Yes?
So would we continue with having to hire 30 additional police officers from this funding? Or would we not have to hire 30 additional police officers with this funding?
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, we would still have the obligation to hire the 30 officers. Councilmember DeLucy, the changes as the ordinance is written would be, one, if approved by the voters, allowing us to utilize additional funds for wage increases and allowing us to use those funds for equipment purchases. If Councilmember Perkins' motion were approved, that cap would be set at $4 million plus the annual CPI expenses that would increase year over year.
Do we not need to have in here that the existing funding would not be cut? It would not be replaced by this $4 million? Does that not need to be in the ordinance?
That is something that could certainly be added to the ordinance, council member. It's not written in there now, but that's certainly, something the council would want to discuss.
I would like to discuss that, Madam Mayor, because the way this proposed sample ballot is written, we could just take this $4 million and replace the existing funding that's already been earmarked with this funding.
Right.
And I know the property was meant to
Madam
raise
Mayor.
additional officers.
Okay, Councilmember DeLucci, I think that would require a additional motion, so let's talk, on this motion and that's on the table, and then to your point, maybe a separate motion could be made in that regards. Councilman Stewart?
I just want to mention that I actually have an amendment ready to address Councilman DeLucy's point she just made. So.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the amendment, on the motion to amend?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I just want some clarity from our city manager. You said 10? This what we're down is 10?
No, originally we were down about 10 with the current staffing we had. Then last year was the first full fiscal year implemented where those 30 new officers were reflected in the TO. So those 30, so we're closer to 40 total officers, vacant positions.
So what are we currently down right now?
About 40,
Is that with Prop P numbers?
correct.
So 10,
No. 40,
40 plus the 30 that we need to go after?
no,
Okay.
40.
Help me understand. You said 10, and the Prop P gives us the ability to recruit 30 additional officers.
Yeah, we were running about 10 vacancies before Prop P was fully implemented.
I understand. So track with me. I'm asking, what are we down right now in staffing?
40,
So 10 and 30.
yes.
Okay, because we've had numbers all over the place. And 2 years ago, we were talking about 25. So we've improved our situation 15.
Well, that fluctuates. We'll have a wave of retirements, and then we'll get a new couple classes of recruits in who go through the academy, go through their probationary period, and then are turned loose into the force. So that's always a moving target, of course. So you're looking at a snapshot of today where we're at's about that 40 number.
So 10. before
I
Prop
don't
P?
track.
I'm just asking, because.
Yeah, and the number's 40.
All of a sudden, we're talking about Prop P numbers in with the current staffing need. And, I mean, I've heard from 18 to 40 that we're down. I can't seem to get a number.
We've got 40
And I think we need
vacancies.
some transparency to know what we're asking our citizens to approve.
We're asking our citizens to approve allowing us to use Prop P funds to increase wages and benefits and to pay for equipment so that we can try to be at the top of market to fill those 40 vacant positions that we have today.
So 10 of those are current staffing budgeted needs.
No, that number used to be 10. Then Prop P was approved. It added 30 new positions. 30 plus 10 is 40.
Okay. Well, okay.
So, if I may,
Go ahead.
Mr. City Manager, just so I'm clear, when Proposition P was approved by the voters almost 2 years ago to the day, that contemplated adding 30 more officers.
Correct.
So at that point, those 30 positions were added into the police department budget
Correct.
as in addition to what we were currently down in positions. So I don't know how many positions we were down at 2 years ago, but we knew the intention was to add 30 to whatever that number was. So now we are down 40
Correct.
positions. We weren't saying in 2019 that we were down 30 positions. We said we needed 30 more officers.
Right, to
That
help.
we aren't just trying to get back to level, we were trying to
Yeah.
increase the
Yeah.
police force.
We were trying to increase the number of resources to match somewhat better the
Right.
population and the square mileage of the city.
Right.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, that's Chief Halsey. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so currently, just looking at our actual current stats right now, we have 35 vacancies, we have 4 conditional hires, so that gets us at 31 total vacancies, including, the use tax and the regular TO on the budget, if that makes sense.
Can you repeat that, Mr. City Manager? It's a little difficult to hear. on
Right. The chief was saying that he had 35 vacancies on his last report with 4 conditional offers out, which would get you down to 31 if those 4 all made it through the process. And then, Chief, I missed the last part as well.
No, that's what I was trying to relay to you, is we actually, so with the 4 conditional offers, we have 31 vacancies if they pass background.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilman
So-
Steinmeier.
So this 31 includes the Prop P number?
Mr. City Manager.
Correct.
So we're 1 down.
From where we used to be before August of 2019.
Would you like to be recognized?
I think you can understand my confusion on this. This
Do
is-
you want to talk?
I think others are too.
One
Yeah.
of these days, it'd be
Yeah.
fine.
Well, you can ask. I'm sorry.
I thought that was the rules here.
Yeah, the rule is that.
I'm just having a real hard
it
time.
requires to be
I'm
recognized.
not worried about when Prop P passed. I'm worried about right now. And you're telling me we're only down 1 officer?
No.
And
No,
30,
40.
I'm having words put in my mouth. We are down 31 positions as we sit here tonight.
is that including the 30 though, additional?
Yes, correct.
So we're down 1 from what we had.
From before this tax was approved, yes.
But
I'm not asking about before the tax approved. I'm talking about right today.
31.
The TO, how many people are missing off the TO?
31.
Without the 30. Without the 30.
You can't tell me that you don't want to talk about before Prop P and then ask before the 30, because the 30 are the TO.
I know how many officers are running this city at night and during the day, and you're telling me we're only 1 short.
No, 31 vacant positions today.
Mr. City, excuse me, I just want to see if I can clarify this. When Prop P was passed, we did not have enough officers. It wasn't to get us up to what we had, it was to increase the number of officers.
Correct.
It wasn't to, fund vacancies. the intention was to increase the number of officers. So 2 years ago, if we had 10 vacancies and we were saying we're gonna increase it by 30, that, gets us to 40. It wasn't that we were inadequate in staffing in 2019. We were inadequate in staffing in 2004 when we passed public safety tax. We were inadequate in staffing when we did the Berkshire study. We were inadequate in staffing in 2012 where a tax was put on the ballot that failed to fund more officers. So the number, is what the number is according to the TO, but the point is that we are and have been inadequate in staffing, which is why we ran these tax referendums to increase staffing, not to get to where we are budgeted to be, but to provide resources to go above that.
Yes, correct, to add additional sworn positions to our force.
Okay. Are there other questions on the motion to amend?
I have, Madam Mayor, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I have to ask, so this, the budget that we voted on, the staffing positions that were presented in terms of salary and benefits included Prop P positions?
Yeah.
Yes. Is there other discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, yes, Councilman Hobart.
Pardon me. And this is sort of a statement, but sort of a confirmation with Mr. Walker. So, we received a letter from the FOP president that was incredibly well thought out, and of the several options that the council had considered, it seemed certainly to be that the FOP was in favor of this. Mr. Walker, I believe it was you that met directly with the FOP president, and they approved this in some form or fashion. Is that right?
Well, I don't want to put words in their mouth. There was nothing necessarily approved. The conversation was that they wanted to make sure that there was a substantial increase in the wages that this city pays to put us at or near the top of the market so that we could be competitive in drawing personnel into the department. We let them know that based on the city's current financial position, it was going to be difficult without reductions in other parts of the budget to meet that, and that's where the conversation pivoted to Proposition P to amend that because that money has been coming in at a higher rate. Several ideas were explored with that, but yes, this is as the letter I believe from the FOP president communicated last week. Their ultimate preference was yes to move forward with an amendment to Proposition P that redirected more of those resources toward increased wages.
Okay. And do you mind if Chief Halsey is still on the line? May I ask him a question?
Yes, that would be fine. Thank you.
Chief, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So this is a bigger rabbit hole that we could go down, and so I don't want to get super deep into details, but it's my understanding that, and it seems to be a fairly well-known issue even amongst the public, that the department is having some difficulty responding to all calls, and certainly timely, because of staffing issues. Police officer on the street staffing issues. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would say we can do much better if we had additional resources. Yes.
So my question for you is then, as the department chief for the police department, with this additional funding, are you in favor of it? Would it be helpful to you to help staff out your department and provide better safety to the community?
Yes.
That's all I had for you, Chief. I wanted to, and thank you very much. I wanted to confirm one more thing with you, Mr. Walker. When we were working on this and discussing this ordinance, we discussed very clearly that this was not intended the ordinance needed to not endanger any of the waterfall money from the way that Prop P was set up before. Is that your understanding, and that's what you believe Councilman Perkins' amendment would do?
I need to clarify that, Councilmember Hobart, and this is what I discussed with the Public Safety Oversight Committee as well, too. Today, the way the tax works, $3 million comes in to satisfy the hiring of those 30 net new officers, and $750,000 is allocated toward animal shelter operations, okay? And then any amount above and beyond that flows to the original sales tax at whatever rate it is. So for example, the general fund, that's 1% of the amount that comes in above and beyond the 3.75 million. If this amendment goes through, what that will do is raise that cap from 3 million to 4 million, which would slow down the rate at which those dollars would waterfall if those dollars continue to come in at the same rate. Now, if you change the formula that you're putting more money into the tax, then, that may speed up the waterfall amount. But yes, it will reallocate an extra $1 million toward the police department operations.
Do you know off the top of your head what the waterfall amount was during the last fiscal year?
It was about $4.4 or $4.5 million, somewhere in that range. So there was that was the gross amount brought in. So about an extra $800,000 or $900,000 waterfalled
To the
to
general
all the
fund?
sales tax funds.
Okay.
So about $500,000 of that was to the general fund, and then the rest to the other 5 sales tax funds.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
So this
Councilman-
would,
Just a moment, Councilman Hobart. I'll
go ahead
let
and let
you go
him
ahead
finish.
and
I just have one more
yeah,
question.
then I'll get to you. Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Councilman Hobart.
thank you, Mayor. So this would affect, the way it's written with this amendment, it would affect those funds. So, we talked about, staying at the $3 million, but in your opinion, tell us why 4 million is more appropriate and that it's a bigger need than those other sales tax funds would need.
$3 million covers the cost of hiring 30 new officers at the average salary and benefit expenses for a police officer, along with equipping them. That's where the $3 million number came from when the numbers were calculated 2 years ago. If you just stick at that amount, then that's not going to leave really much of extra resources available to increase the salary and benefits to a higher rate and accomplish the objective that was discussed the last few months of trying to attract and retain more officers into the police department force here in Independence.
Okay, and so one last question, and then I'll turn it over. To be very clear to the citizens, this tax is it's already in place, but this amendment and putting this back on the ballot, the intent behind that is to give current officers raises, to give enticement to hire new officers, and to cover raises across the board, even for those new officers, right? So we're trying to keep the guys we have. We're trying to get new ones and also get folks through the academy and everything. That's the point of this, right? Just to fill those vacancies.
Right. The hypothesis, if you will, would be that by paying at a higher wage rate than our peers that neighbor us here in the metropolitan area, particularly here in the eastern part of the metro. That would put us at a competitive advantage as to why you should choose the Independence Police Department over one of the other jurisdictions that borders us.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. City Manager and Madam Mayor.
Councilman Steinmeier?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to do one more question, and I'm done. Looking at the number 31, includes Prop P. We need one higher. Prop P money goes into effect, according to what you've told us tonight. We don't need a special election. We need one higher. Prop P comes in when we have complete staffing. You've said that we're 31 short. That includes Prop P. 30 hires. We just need one hire, and we have the Prop P numbers. We don't even need a special election for this, right?
No, I don't follow your math. I'm sorry.
31 includes Prop P hires, correct? That's what you just said.
Right.
All we need is one hire, and then we have access to the Prop P money.
We've been hiring all of our new officers out of Do you want me to finish?
I'm sorry, go
Yes,
ahead.
Mr. City Manager.
We've been hiring all of our new officers out of Prop P funds. So to say that that one is a general fund is a misnomer. It's a all across the board as to which resources are paying them. So most of the new officers that have come in the last year, we've been hiring those out of Prop P funds.
What we aren't doing with Prop P funds is utilizing it for people who were here prior to Prop P, correct?
Yeah.
Councilman Huff?
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit muddy here. So you're not supposed to be using the Prop P money until you pull your other one, so your TO. So how did?
No, there's no restriction on that. It's just a higher. What we can't do is reduce the number of officers we have. We're supposed to add 30 net new officers.
Yeah, seems like we're getting awful muddy out here. You know, I mentioned this over about 3 years ago to hire a police officer who was in a crisis, and I got chastised for that. Now here we are jacking around with this. These officers, in order to hold them here and recruit new, we're going to have to get some money.
Right.
So I've got no problem with what's going on here. We just need to make sure that we're very transparent with the public here, because we voted on something, and all of a sudden all these numbers are coming. I just can't believe that before Prop P, and now we're just down one officer other than them 30. I just find that hard to believe. I see 10 or 15 officers that retired, and I don't see that many new faces out here, but maybe there's somewhere else. I'm just having a real hard time with that. So these officers that you've hired, where are they at as far as on the street? That's the most important thing to me. It's the most important thing here is the public safety. This city is unprotected. I want to know how many officers you have on the street and how long we're waiting for these new hires.
I don't understand your question. Yeah, Chief Halsey, if you understand, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you hire somebody that's, as you all know, I'll just put it back out there, is if you hire a non-certified officer, he or she has to go to the academy, which is 6 months, and then there's 6 months of field training that we put them through at the department before we let them go on their own. So yes, there is a delay in, getting those officers trained and releasing them out to the field. So that is always going to be an issue. Even if you hire a certified officer, you don't have the year-long wait, but you still could have up to 6 months. Depends on what agency he or she came from and how much training they need. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Yeah, but one other part of that. So say you have 11 cadets or whatever you want to call them. I'm not sure about the technology here or the terminology. I'm sorry. So are they obligated to come to this city? Because I've heard in the past that we've paid for these people to go through and they have a financial thing to this city and just walk off and they're never charged back. I know in IBW, when they come through the Union Hall, you have to pay back the Union Hall if you come to the city. I'm just wondering on cadets, do they have to come here, or can they walk and go somewhere else? And the ones that have walked, have we held them accountable for what we paid for them?
Yeah, so, hey, that's a great question. So I have dealt with this issue with the previous attorneys with the city, and yeah, they do sign a contract. Have we held them to that? No, we have not. But that's something that we have talked about recently about being readdressed and looking at that again to determine if we can legally hold them to a financial commitment if they, for whatever reason, don't make it or they decide this career is not for them. Because, you know, the biggest upfront cost we have is the academy, number one, and then after they get out of the academy is all the equipment, the gun and holster. But, you know, that stuff we can usually reassign, but like their bulletproof vests are custom made. So, you know, those are about $850. So that's a very good question, but that's kind of where we're at with it. I hope if you got any other questions on that, just please ask me and I'll try to clarify.
Well, most contracts I ever sign, they hold me to the candle there, so I don't understand why we wouldn't collect our funds, especially when we're talking about the shortage of money in this city. That we're letting people slide that owe us money. I know myself, I don't get to slide on anything, but that answers my question. So how many cadets do we have right now?
I'd have to look. I'd have to go back on, but we had 17 in the process, either going through the academy or going through the FTO program about a week ago. So it's about 17. And again, to answer your question, Councilmember Huff, I agree with you. That was the legal opinion of past city attorneys, but that's something that we talked about looking at addressing again to see where we want to go as a city as far as recouping money.
Yeah, one other thing. Okay, so this meeting's been planned. Talking to the city manager, Councilman Steinmeier has talked to him, and you also. It really bothers me that we're just guessing, and we're talking about a lot of money here and a lot of taxpayers' money, that we're guessing how many people we're down and how many are here and how many are there. As running this show, the public wants to know, what are we doing with this money? We need exact numbers. We need to know where all this money is going. What we're doing with this. I got the floor right now.
Councilman Huff.
So I would like to know exact numbers. I would like to know how many people have escaped without paying this city, and I would like to have exact numbers for the citizens of this city. That's all I'm asking for. You know, I'm all for these police making. We have to do something. We're down. We have to do something. That's not a problem with me. I'm just trying to figure out where we're doing with all the money. What about the 18 officers or whatever was missing last year? What happened to the funds that? And I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you. So you don't fulfill the job. So you had 18 positions. Say it's $2 million. Where did $2 million go?
Helps pay for overtime, and it helps balance your general fund budget and other places. To try to segregate these departments is a misnomer. This is an ecosystem where these dollars are not, they're budgeted maybe in the police department, but they help pay for overtime, and what's left over helps cover snow removal costs or park maintenance costs or these other dollars. The general fund dollars are least restricted dollars we have.
So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
I'm using what the JFOA does to budget and following accounting standards and getting a clean audit every year.
Address your questions to the chair, and I will address them to the city manager. The amendment the motion that is on the floor to increase the waterfall from 3 million to 4 million, we know that the number of personnel in this department and every department fluctuates. What this is about is when Prop P, when this council adopted the ordinance to put Prop P on the ballot, I believe the vote was 6-1, and the voters approved it. That was based on the information provided to us from the police chief and the city manager that we needed 30 new officers from where we were at that time, that we needed to increase our police force by 30 new officers. That's where the dollar amount of $3 million came in, that would trigger the overflow to the other, the general fund and the other special taxing funds once that $3 million mark was hit. plus the $750,000 for the animal shelter. So how many officers we were down at that point that were budgeted, that we had the money available to hire if we could recruit them? This was above and beyond that number. This money was intended to provide funding for non-budgeted positions. Once the tax was approved, that dollar amount in those positions went into the budget. So I think the important thing in my mind, is how much money is it going to take to fund the 30 positions that the police department told us that they needed, told the community that they needed. Now that number can change, and today it might be 31 if these new recruits get hired on. Somebody, we can, some more people could retire or be relocated or whatever, and that number is always going to change. I don't know that it's possible to ever say, how many, we know how many officers we need to adequately protect this city today. That number could be different in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but we've been trying to adequately staff the police department for a long time. This is not a new issue. For as long as I've lived in the city, we've been talking about how do we access resources to adequately staff the police department. And we've undergone a number of studies to try to pinpoint how many officers we need. So I think we're getting, to me, a little bit sidetracked by the number of officers, when what the motion is about is what does the level of funding need to be to increase our police department and trigger the overflow to the other taxing, the general fund and the other taxes. So if that needs to be increased by $1 million over what it currently is for retention purposes, that, I believe, Councilman Perkins, is what the motion is getting at.
Correct.
Now, keep in mind that means all the other funds are going to collectively be reduced by $1 million. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to know where the $1 million figure came from.
Mr. City Manager.
In the course of our conversations, Councilwoman DeLucy with the FOP, and I don't, again, want to put words in their mouth, but that is an amount that we think would help across the board raise the wage tables for those 160 or so positions that are classified as a police officer, master police officer, or sergeant represented by the FOP. That would help put us at or near the top here in the metropolitan area.
But, so this amendment changes the Prop P language insofar as the 3 million or 4 million is no longer restricted to just hiring new additional police officers. It's expanded to include equipment, plus it's expanded to include existing officers and existing equipment.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the waterfall is going to be decreased by $1 million, which is going to be decreasing funds into the general fund, correct?
Correct.
And the general fund funds the police department.
Correct.
So why do we need to increase the 3 million to 4 million? I'm missing that logic.
Sure. So the general fund right now is beyond tapped out, and I know you know a lot of this, council member, but that budget right now, 81% of it is allocated toward personnel costs. The city has a fund balance policy of 16%. We've driven that up year over year, but it's still hovering at 8% or so. And then between the two public safety departments, police and fire, 72% of that is commanded by those two departments. So unless we're willing to make cuts to things like transit or code enforcement or some of the other activities funded by the general fund, there aren't a lot of new resources revenue-wise coming into that. That fund is growing somewhere between 0.5% to maybe in a great year 1% year over year, whereas with the change in the voter approval, that local use tax is growing at a phenomenal rate. And with the work that was done legislatively, additional resources will be flowing into that in 2 years once that is expanded to cover all online sales, not just those with a physical presence in Missouri. So Prop P is our healthiest resource right now with as far as revenue growth, and provides us that opportunity, if we wanted to increase the wages for the police department.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion to amend? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Huff?
Yes.
Perkins?
Yes.
Stewart?
Yes.
DeLucy?
Yes.
Steinmeier?
Yes.
Hobart?
Yes.
Mayor Weir?
Yes, motion passes. My next question, which I think hopefully we've settled, is regarding the ballot language. The ballot language, again, says that there would be allowed funding for all police department personnel and equipment. I think that this is unclear as to how those waterfall funds would come into place. The original Prop P language was simply stated for the implementation of the local use tax. It didn't say anything in the ballot language about about the waterfall, the $3 million, the $750. It didn't say anything about that. It said this would be to implement a local use tax and with some restrictions as to that would be utilized only for the hiring of new personnel. Is that correct? I'm sorry. You're looking at me as if I maybe said that wrong. Okay. All right. Okay. So I think that it's important now that we have the local use tax in place and it's dedicated by a vote of the people to these certain purposes, that it's very clear that moving forward, those other taxing funds would still continue to receive funding. This appears to say that the funding would be entirely for the police department. So that's my question to Councilman Perkins and Hobart.
Well, Madam Mayor, excuse me. Well, Madam Mayor, to stay consistent with what we just did, then we would need to amend the language of the ballot to include that waterfall cap.
I don't, if you're asking me, I don't know. Mr. City Manager, do you?
I'll defer to Mr. Cover over there, but I think we tried to mirror that as much as we could with the original ballot language of 2019 and the ordinance, which went into more specificity. I know there's minimum, per state statute, there's minimum amounts of language that have to be included. We can expand upon it, which would be the council's prerogative tonight, but I'll let Jeremy explain the methodology there.
Yes, thank you. To answer the question, we did try in drafting the ballot language to mirror it as much as possible based on the original ballot language, recognizing that at that point it was a potential tax, and now that tax has been imposed. In this situation, the city has, with the ballot language, has chosen to limit it down. So we've already, the tax isn't changing with this. It's just how the city can utilize the funds generated by the tax. So if it's the council's decision to add additional language in here regarding the waterfall or anything else, that can certainly be added. It was left out to try to simplify it, but if it, in simplifying it, if it's not clear enough, then it can be clarified.
So, there's always two binding pieces of legislation when doing this. One is the ballot language and one is the ordinance. So would it be your opinion, as long as it's clear in the ordinance that supports the ballot language, that it would not need to be specifically included in the ballot language?
Yes, I would agree with that, and that was how the original ordinance was set up. There was no, as has been mentioned, there was no mention of the waterfall or the 30 officers or anything like that in the ballot language. That was in
Right.
the overall ordinance supporting the ballot language.
So that would be the responsibility of the city in providing information about the election to clarify in the information that the city puts forward, and, you know, presumably a campaign committee that would be supporting this to explain that, but that it would be specifically referenced in the ordinance.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not sure we need an amendment.
I would leave as is, Mayor.
Okay. Finally, section 3, which talks about the city clerk forwarding the information to the Director of Revenue. Mr. City Manager, I'm not clear as to why this would need to be included at all, since there's no changes in the tax rate or the tax collection. Why does the Director of Revenue need to be notified?
Jeremy, I'll defer to you again.
Well, obviously, that was in there from the original ordinance where the tax was imposed. It was left in here essentially just out of an abundance of caution that we notified the Department of Revenue because we were changing the tax. If that's not, it's not necessarily required, because, again, this doesn't change anything that happens on the Department of Revenue side. This only changed what happens on the city side. So if it's the city's preference that leave that out, that works.
I think it's confusing to the public and the voters if we're saying we're sending it to the Department of Revenue. The question I would have would be, well, why? If you're not changing the tax rate, why do you have to notify the Department of Revenue? If you are notifying the Department of Revenue, then you must be changing the tax rate. So to me, it's just, a little bit confusing. So I would defer to Councilman Hobart and Perkins on this.
If it would make more sense, I'll make the motion to retract that language.
And I'd second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll on the motion to amend.
Councilmember Huff?
Yes.
Perkins?
Yes.
Stewart?
Yes.
DeLucy?
Yes.
Steinmeier?
Yes.
Hobart?
Yes.
Mayor Weir?
Yes, motion passes. Is there anything else on the ordinance?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Stewart. Oh, yeah, we did have to talk about the other issue that was brought up about not infiltrating existing funds.
Yes, I actually had a couple of things. That was one
Yeah.
of them. In the original, the current Prop P, it doesn't allow us to pay for equipment. So why was that put in? Now let me make this very clear. I want this to go forward. I want it to pass on the ballot. I'm just concerned that with the equipment in there, that the citizens may have a problem with that. So in your discussions, who brought this up? Why was it brought up? We already have a public safety tax. Why are we trying to pay for it here as well?
Yeah, Councilmember, the recommendation for that did formally came from the Public Safety Sales Tax Oversight Committee, which met on Friday. That was part of their motion. The thought process there is that it's great if we can hire the 30 officers, but if we don't have the sustainable resources to equip them to do the job, then you've got 30 people on a Huffy bike and a water pistol. So we're trying to come up with something that would be more effective in doing their job. From a staffing perspective, the public safety sales tax, while we're very grateful to have it, that brick and mortar amount is not growing at the rate that the use tax amount is, as consumers are transitioning over to the online purchases. So the thought was to open that up to be able to make sure we have a sustainable source moving forward for all the evolving equipment needs of the department.
Okay, another question. The mayor had brought up funding for all police department personnel. So does that include like dispatchers or crime analysts or anybody else that works for the department?
No, it doesn't include the support staff. This is for the sworn officers.
Shouldn't it say that?
I mean, I would be open to that suggestion.
Okay, so I'm going to make an amendment to this where it says to add sworn in front of police department personnel.
Is this, Councilman Stewart, in the ballot language you're referring to?
Yes, in the ballot language,
Okay.
where it says police department personnel, and we put sworn in front of that. And then at the end of the ballot language, I want to try to include language that protects the money that is already allotted to the police department in the budget. So what I came up with was the current general fund percentage allocation for the police department and the no-kill animal shelter shall remain in effect.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendment, the motion to amend?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So I guess the question would be, then how would this ballot language officially read?
Councilman Stewart?
So, I mean, as it is right now, I mean, you may read the entire thing. Okay.
So, Councilman, I think we have the first part, add the word sworn before police department, so it would read,
Shall the local use tax currently imposed by the City of Independence, Missouri, which is dedicated to a no-kill animal shelter and funding additional police officers, be amended to allow for the funding of all sworn police department personnel, actually,
and equipment.
and equipment. And then voting in favor of this question will not result in any tax increase. The current general fund percentage allocation for the police department and no-kill animal shelter shall remain in effect.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Dan Hobart. Councilman Stewart, instead of saying sworn police department personnel, is it legal or would it make more sense to say sworn police officers so that people aren't confused like there aren't some other version of personnel?
Yeah, Mr. City Manager.
I would want to firm this up with Mr. Cover, but my thought is, again, to the technicality of the table of organization, there is a position in there of police officer, master police officer, and sergeant, and then, of course,
Yeah.
on above. So I think having that, say, sworn police personnel, my fear would be somebody down the road, Councilmember, may challenge that you could only use that on the TO positions that are classified as police officer. I don't know if Mr. Cover has that same fear.
That sounds.
No, that's
reasonable.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So, to our Mr. Culver or Mr. Walker, that sworn police personnel is fine.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I think we would
Oh,
take out
okay.
the word department. Is that how you read it back?
Yeah, I mean, that,
So we would
yes.
say funding all sworn police personnel and
Yes.
equipment?
Is that correct?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I'd be fine with that.
Okay. Is there any
And
further,
then just,
Councilman Hobart?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mayor, thank you very much. Mr. City Manager, just to clarify, I don't want I want the same thing Mr. Stewart does. Does that language that he added cover that? On the second part, the leaving the pets and police, the pets part, the animal shelter the same and all that.
Again, my only, and I don't want to put words in Councilmember Stewart's mouth, but my thought on that regarding transparency would be if we said to not reduce it below the current general fund amount, so that it's not interpreted by some future council or staff that we can't go above their current amounts. So I think your intent is to make sure that we're not supplanting those funds in the future, that they get, that department is appropriated at least the amount that they're getting presently from the general fund?
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, actually.
So Councilman Stewart, I have a question.
Yes.
Because the way that you stated it, I think is a little different than what the city manager has stated, that what you're looking at is that the percentage would not change, not necessarily the dollar amount, but the amount of, I mean, we know that the police department is, a certain percentage of the overall budget, and whether revenues increase or decrease, some beyond, a lot beyond our control, but that the percentage would flow with that, which I feel would potentially be more protective of the existing funds than a dollar amount.
Yeah, I put percentage for a reason, because the dollar amount can change.
Makes sense. And so then if we could have a terrible financial crisis and we're not collecting sales tax and and we're not collecting use tax, the supply chain just totally dries up, then we're not tied to a dollar amount. We're tied to a percentage of the revenue that we are able to collect.
Yeah, I understand. That makes sense. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Does that make sense to you, Councilman Stewart?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment, the motion to amend? Okay. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Tough?
Yes.
Perkins?
Yes.
Stewart?
Yes.
DeLucy?
Yes.
Steinmeier?
Yes.
Hobart?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Motion passes. Any further discussion on the first reading of ordinance 21057?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. Interesting evening for everybody to watch the process in place. There's been some discussion of how this was done, maybe not in the open, in the public, but this is open, this is public, this is how we need to do it, and this is the proper way of doing this. We come up with ideas, thoughts, and concepts, and we bring them here and we hash them out in front. The Public Safety Committee, they met. This was some of their recommendations that we move forward. It was our job to hammer out some of the words and specificness of how we can move this department forward. Public safety all across the board is an important subject, topic, and need of our citizens. So this is what we're planning to do. Taking it back to the citizens for their reconsideration is the proper and right thing to do. So this is why we were here having these discussions tonight to move this forward. So I want to thank everybody for their input. It was a good discussion, very robust, and I think we're moving in the right path to where we want to do to achieve our goals. So with that, Mayor.
Okay. Are there any other council member comments before we adjourn to the study session? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned. I will
Madam-
call,
Madam Mayor,
yes.
I'm so sorry. Did she actually, Ms. Barron's actually need to read the ordinance?
Oh, yes, that would be good. Excuse me. Then I will call the meeting back to order.
I already read the ordinance.
She already read the ordinance. She read it before the discussion. Okay, so I don't
It's
need
been
to
too
call
long. Thank you.
the meeting back to order. We are adjourned from the special called agenda, and I will call to order the council study session for Monday, August 9th, 2021. Our first presentation this evening is from the Innovation Center. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Madam. Go ahead.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Okay, so I will, since the city manager has no microphone, I will introduce Xander Winkle, who works for our Independence Economic Development Council. He manages and operates our Innovation Center, which is our business incubator located within the headquarters of the Independence School District on Forest Avenue in Independence, Missouri.
Excellent. Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Winkle.
Mayor, for that introduction. Thank you, council members, Madam Mayor. Really excited to talk to you this evening about the Innovation Center. We are incredibly proud of the work that we've done, our mission, and the results of what we've been doing with the Innovation Center. Of course, for those of you who don't know, the Innovation Center is a traditional business incubator. We provide space, resources, connections to startup businesses to help them successfully launch whatever it is, maybe their venture or idea or startup. So let's start with our parent organization. So the Innovation Center is a division of our local Economic Development Council, founded in 1983, public-private partnership dedicated to growing, retaining, and attracting businesses in independence. And part of that growth of businesses spurred the creation of the Innovation Center in 2010. The city and the local school district in Independence and the Economic Development Council came together to develop the old, as you saw on the first slide there, the old Independence Regional Hospital Complex, and use a portion of that as a facility to help startup businesses, give them a space to operate, and provide a program to help them out with. Currently, we've got 3 total staff who are all with us this evening. We've got 2 folks at the Innovation Center, and then we've got 1 person who is at the Independence Chamber Building. There we all are. Jody Krantz is our Vice President for the Economic Development Council. I am the Director of the Innovation Center, and Alex is my right-hand man, helping me out there at that facility. So, where we're at right now with the Business Incubator. As of 2020, the Innovation Center has $32.1 million of total direct economic impact. What that means is the lion's share of that is salaries of all the businesses that we have developed and helped grow. Lion's share is salaries. That's also including local taxes, permits, fees, and other dollars that are staying directly here in the community. $7.59 million of that is directly here in Independence, including only the businesses that are within our boundaries of the city. Right now, the Innovation Center, and actually this is from last week when I sent this presentation, we've added 3 new businesses between then, so we're actually at 83 current businesses, which is absolutely a record for us, that are operating out of the Innovation Center right now. That, represents more than 140 jobs just in the incubator operating right now. And we're doing all of that with an operating budget of just $170,000. So what that means is for every $1 of operating budget, we are delivering in Independence specifically $20 of direct economic impact. Again, that's primarily salaries, but that's also including permits and fees and local taxes that are going directly into the economy here. So we started thinking with our board, what's next? What more can we do? So 4 kind of general categories of things moving forward, looking at other potential facilities, looking at expanding our educational offering, also looking at, we've utilized a little bit of our 501c3 to find some grant and charitable funding, but that could also be expanded. And then also looking, re-exploring some of the pilot programs that we initiated with tech business development and how we might be able to expand that as well. So talking about second stage facilities in particular, one that's definitely moving forward. I got a meeting with them this week. The Inglewood Cafe, part of the building there is incorporating a cafe space that you could have a startup restaurateur go through a program, have an actual restaurant space, and rotate through. So that's something that's really exciting, that's developing with all the initiatives and excitement in Inglewood. One that we've looked at also, huge need across the board with a lot of different organizations, is cold storage. That's, speaking of the kitchen facility in the Innovation Center, that's absolutely one of our bottlenecks. And we get calls regularly from folks that say, hey, do you have some extra capacity in your cold storage? Absolutely not right now. So looking at how we could expand that into the community and use that as an attraction tool and a retention tool for the businesses that we are working with. Another item, we were looking at food halls. We've got a number of restaurants, and we've got some pop-up restaurants that operate out of the Innovation Center, looking for a space in the community to move into. A food hall model that we've explored some others in the metro would be perfect for that, again, to retain those graduates and retain those businesses here in Independence. Also looking at boutique manufacturing. This is actually something that we've currently found a niche in, that we have this facility of the Innovation Center that really doesn't exist too many other places in the metro with different, whether it's cosmetics or clothes or chemical or technology hardware manufacturing. Those are all businesses that we work with that are typically looking for smaller scale boutique manufacturing spaces, not huge scale. Their target market is kind of the stuff that the larger manufacturers wouldn't want to take on that kind of order, but they can fill that niche and meet that market need and make a fantastic business out of that. Another potential facility would revolve around co-packing or contract manufacturing for food businesses. About 90% of our food product manufacturers are going to contract out their manufacturing. They're not going to build a whole new facility. So to be able to retain those businesses and those jobs here, if we have more options for them to contract with a co-packer in Independence, that would again retain those businesses, retain those jobs here. And then just overall small flexible spaces. Jody has been doing a fantastic job partnering some of our graduate companies with spaces that are available here in Independence. But it would be fantastic if we had some more options there. So these are different opportunities in different spaces that might help increase even the results that we're seeing from the Innovation Center. So it's huge. Some of the opportunities there, huge for retention of our businesses. We already see some national attention, particularly on the culinary incubator, from businesses locating here to Independence, from California, from Chicago. If we build more onto this and truly make it a destination for those businesses, I can see a lot more potential national attraction for this asset and for folks wanting to start their business here in Independence. And of course, though, some of the kind of weaknesses of the plan are it's costly. It takes some time. So just factoring that into that equation there. The other category we're looking at, we already have a fantastic partnership with Mid-Continent Public Library. We run a lot of our educational programs in tandem with what they're doing. and looking to expand that. I know this next year we're planning a large food symposium through their food ed program, so it's really exciting to see that grow. There's some more opportunities though. Getting all of our internship programs back up and going after this last year with the school districts, with different student programs. There's lots of opportunities to connect, interns with these small startup businesses where they can see the whole thing from start to finish, all the different components of the business, and have a lot of opportunity to grow with those organizations. Also just general workforce development programs. We've started working with Truman Heartland, with CSL, and other organizations. Again, it fits right in. It's a need of our businesses. And then how we can train folks, attract that workforce, and then continue to grow these businesses. And we've seen that play out in the Innovation Center. In one of the recent companies this past year, IMP, they brought in, 3 different interns right off the bat, eventually hired them, brought in 3 more interns and are training them and hiring them and growing their business. So thinking about how we can do that more strategically, and building those programs into what we're doing with the Innovation Center. And then just general entrepreneurship training. That's a huge way that we market ourselves, is how do we go out there and train those future entrepreneurs? What more can we do with that? And then other student-centered programs. There's a lot of different groups and it's a personal passion of mine. I had great internships, I had great programs. I love to give back to that. So I'm always thinking about what other student-centered things can we do to help that next generation of potential entrepreneurs. We've already got great partnerships in this area. We've got existing programs. I think a lot of these things can be deployed quickly, but we definitely rely strongly on our partners because I have mentioned, we've got 100% of our staff right here. So to really deploy those kind of programs successfully, we definitely need those partners on board. Another area that I think we've got a lot of potential, we've run some kind of pilot programs. A couple of years ago, we did a program with Digital Sandbox. We've been in communication with the KC Tech Council on their Apprenti program. Basically, they're apprenticeships for folks getting into the tech sector. And this kind of crosses over between that workforce development and entrepreneurship. They go hand in hand here because you see those technology businesses grow from existing workforces of tech companies. You kind of hear the joke, the majority of tech businesses getting started up in Kansas City, it involved a group of people from Cerner getting together and having an idea. So definitely building up on that, thinking of how we can do that strategically, helps with workforce, helps with attraction of businesses, and then helps with the entrepreneurship sector in technology. And then also exploring, we've looked at a few different grant programs that could contribute to all of these other things that I have mentioned. So we need to think strategically about how do we get the expertise, the grant writer, the person that can focus on that. It's very time intensive, but a huge opportunity to launch a lot of these programs. So all these grants that I've got listed out here correspond to some of these programs if we were to launch or look into that could fund them. And then another component is just telling this story. I think a lot of times when I talk to folks about the Innovation Center, they're like, okay, what's that? And then talk about all the things that we've done, and they're like, that's fantastic. That is incredibly cool. How did I not know this? I live down the street. And that's a common conversation that I'll have with folks. So I think there's some opportunity as well to more strategically tell the story. We're in our 4 walls every day, working away, helping to contribute to the results from this organization. Definitely benefits us to get out there and tell folks what we're doing. So this is a perfect opportunity, so I definitely appreciate the invite to help contribute to telling that story. And then this was the ask that I had of our board. These are all fantastic opportunities. The Innovation Center, because of its partnership with the Economic Development Council here in Independence, because of our strong partnership with the Independence School District that owns the building that we're in, our program is strong, but it's at its current capacity. We've got 2 incubators, we've got 2 staff members dedicated to making sure that this thing is chugging along, doing what it has meant to be done since its inception. The other thing to think about is a $1 to $20 return on investment is incredible. That is an amazing return. So what else could we, if we're making that contribution, we can expect from an organization that already exists, that's got that reliability, will be 11 years old here in a couple months, which is fantastic for a business incubator, that it's got those results, that it's a for sure thing, that we can deliver on that return on investment. So the ask is simply to consider those future investments, and if there is opportunities that anyone in the community can identify to make those connections so we can continue and grow what we are already doing in the community here. But that's everything that I've got, so I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all.
Thank you very much, Xander. Are there any comments or questions from the council?
Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So thank you, Xander, for coming. After you gave this presentation to the Board of Directors of the EDC, I talked to the mayor and said, we've got to get Xander up in front of the council to let him showcase what you're doing over there. It's a hidden gem. We know you're there. Not a lot of people know you're there. And the point of contact you have is tremendous. And that's the other part of our job, is to help you and the EDC, to help us facilitate these small businesses, to help generate this tax dollars so we can put money back in our general fund, as you graciously sat through and heard our robust discussion on. So thank you for all the hard work that you're doing, and let's keep this conversation going to keep you guys moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I would extend the invitation to anyone here tonight. I love showing the place off. I love talking about it. So happy to give tours, happy to connect with folks, or answer any questions even beyond tonight about the Innovation Center.
Okay. I too was very, very impressed with the presentation that you gave to the board. We get an update from you every month, but this was a really in-depth look at the success of the Innovation Center over the past 11 years. But I would say this is a sector that has really thrived during the global pandemic, as many businesses are shifting and people are shifting employment. And people are looking towards different types of employment or seeking to be self-employed and to pursue an entrepreneurial path. We have a great resource here in Independence to assist people in doing that and in planting businesses here in Independence and across our region. Some of these businesses don't land in our city, but they land in our region and help our regional economy. I think because of its location inside of the building that it's in, it's not very visible to the general public, but the people who know that the people who are looking for this are finding us highly respected within Xander's world of economic development and business incubation, especially around the food sector. We are very well known in this particular sector, and Xander has many opportunities and is invited many times to go out and speak to groups and engage with groups and be involved with discussions that help to build our small business presence in all sorts of industries. So the growth over the last year has been absolutely phenomenal. And I'm very grateful to you and Alex and Jody, a very small but staff that keeps us all together and helps our economy here in Independence.
I appreciate the kind words.
Is there anything else from the council? Okay, thank you, Xander.
Awesome, thank you.
Our first staff report this evening is the review and discussion of the proposed ballot ordinance on the 0.5% fire protection sales tax. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, good evening, Madam.
Why don't we get Steve to move one of these
Yeah,
microphones for
I'll
you?
grab one of those after we get that going. So just very quickly, last week, the council had first reading of the ordinance, which Mr. Fairbanks spoke to earlier tonight, which would amend the existing fire sales tax. We received some questions from council members about that tax and how it would be imposed and the need, et cetera. So Chief Short is going to give you a quick presentation on how that's to be, if it were approved, how it would be implemented and utilized and such. So Chief Short, I'll go ahead and defer to you.
He's coming behind you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As you recall, back in May, I stepped up and presented a little bit of a strategic plan, or basically an assessment of where we were at with the fire department. I'm not going to go completely through that again, but I will kind of just summarize a few things that I hope will address the questions that council members have asked about this. I think it's important to know the background of where we're at. As Chris had explained earlier, we look back in 1991. The reason I look at that date is because that was the last time major changes, or I guess you would say, were ever made to the department. Back then, we were running about 6,400 calls. Our operational staff in the field was at 161. That's our uniformed folks out on the trucks. Today, we're running 23,500 calls approximately, and we're down to 154 people, or 154 uniformed positions in the field. We've not increased. Our call load has, but our operational mode has not. One of the things to look at is, when we look at that call load, one of the questions that we're going to get a lot, and I expected it every time, is we also talked about that call load and what were we really running? Well, back in 1991, if you look at the differential of the types of calls we were running, only about 10% of those calls were fire calls. When you look at today, at the 23,500 calls plus that we're running, only about 5% are fire calls. But everybody wants to know, if it's only 5%, why do you have all those trucks? Why don't you do it cheaper in a different way? The simplest way for me to understand, to maybe hopefully have you understand, is the way we run those 5% of calls is what affects your insurance rates for your home, your business, any property that you own inside the city limits. So by changing that 5% in the way that we would operate would thus cause every insurance paying person in the city of Independence to have a raise in their insurance. Now, the difference is, what else? Well, we've taken on a lot more jobs, I guess you would say. First, it started with hazardous materials. Then it started with emergency medical services. We have a private ambulance service in town. We don't hold as restrictions as high to that ambulance service because right now we don't subsidize them. So we don't have that high a standard. However, we still want to protect our citizens. So we decided we're going to respond to our citizens in need as quickly as possible to stabilize the medical condition and then get them transported. If we continue in the way that we're going now, our response times, which are measured two different ways. You can look at an average response time, or the national standard is look at the 90th percentile. The 90th percentile says through NFPA we should be able to make any fire call with all, or with the first apparatus within 5 minutes, 20 seconds. We should make the first EMS call with any apparatus within 6 minutes, 20 seconds. Currently, our 90th percentile has now gone over 9 minutes. And that is because as the call loads increase, we have more apparatus that are going to other areas of the city, increasing their response time. In other words, where one station with one truck used to be good, it probably needs to have 2 trucks there. Where some areas of our city back in 1991 had little population, now have more population. Total-wise, the city may not have changed, but the demographics of where those people are has changed. The demographics of their needs for emergency medical services has changed. And it's important for us to be able to continue to keep up with that. One of the things that we look at is that the fire department is a department that is funded, for the most part, entirely through the general fund. We're not a department that raises revenue, and I understand that. But that has never been the intention of any city, state, county to have a fire department that is a moneymaker. There's no such thing. Even the cities that have tried to farm it out have found they still lose money. Whether it's from the company that they're working with, or it's because that company has a bottom dollar, so they cut back services, which then cuts back raises insurance rates and costs the people. So it's important for us to know that we have this issue that we need to take care of. One of the other questions is, well, what is our need? Well, it kind of is in a threefold. We have a current tax that was passed in 2004 and then renewed in 2016. When that tax was passed, it was passed at an 1/8 cent for capital needs and another 1/8 cent for the rebuilding of 3 of our 10 stations that we had. That additional 1/8 cent was only good for 4 years. However, we had 7 more stations that we've tried to essentially just keep adding on to or to keep improving, but they still grow old. That other 1/8 cent that we had for capital improvements was to improve our apparatus, was to improve our larger equipment. We were also under that original ordinance that a certain amount of money was kept in the general fund that covered other services and supplies so that major capital sales tax could be utilized for purchasing those big capital purchases. Back then, a fire truck, fully equipped, probably cost us about $350,000. Now, a fire truck, the smallest of our pumpers, costs us $550, and that's before, or $550,000, that's before we equip it. So every time we have to replace a truck, we have to equip it. When we look at replacing apparatus is not purely on mileage, although it probably could be with some of our apparatus, but we look at not only the mileage, but the amount of fuel that we've paid and the amount of maintenance that we pay. And we come up with a $1 per mile cost for that apparatus. Generally, as an accepted across the nation and in most places, somewhere around $2.50 to $3 per mile is a range at which you should be replacing apparatus. We have apparatus that generally reach that amount within 5 years. And in most cases, those apparatus are generally expected to last 10 years. Our aerial apparatus is even expected to last 15 years. We're making 15 years, but as it's going, it's not going to make much difference. We're looking at a difference between an aerial that cost about $700,000 and $800,000 in 2004 to the aerial that we just purchased and took a year and a half to get in, which brought us right at 1.2 million. So there is a significant difference that we have to concern ourselves with in being able to, again, provide the future. An additional thing that has happened with this tax is initially that tax was not designed to offset any personnel costs. And that's how it was written in the first ordinance. In the second ordinance, it got narrowed down. And through that, we have now added in some of our personnel costs. Now, those personnel costs are based on meeting the objectives of that task. In other words, approximately $200,000 goes into training of new firefighters, and approximately another 250 to 300 goes into two of our positions that directly support how that tax is spent, training officer and the services chief. That takes up almost a quarter of our tax currently. Then when you take onto the fact that rooftop or brick and mortar is going down and we're not getting potentially any waterfall in the future, we're in even higher need of what's there. So what do we need to spend it on? Well, first we need to make sure that we're replacing stations. We have at least 2 stations that right now need to be immediately replaced. We're looking at about $500 to $550 a square foot for a 10,000 square foot station. $4 million for one station. That doesn't include property. That doesn't include a lot of the amenities that would go with it. We're looking at the fact that we need to, again, continually rotate through all the replacement of our apparatus to keep them in good running order, so that not only our first line apparatus are in good order, but our reserve apparatus are in good order. Because we have to service the ones that are in, that are the front line, and we have to have something to back them up. We have 3 stations that were built that were wood frame stations built back in the early 80s that weren't designed to be a long-term solution. They were a short-term solution back then. But, of course, the solution was never solved. So those stations are also going to be in need probably within the next 5 to 10 years. One station we're having some significant foundation issues with as well right now. So we have that need. Our apparatuses have gone up, our stations have gone up, our cost to do maintenance has gone up, but probably more important than all, the wear and tear on our personnel for this increase in these calls is probably the greatest cost that we have to the city. These stations that are running 2,500 to 3,000 calls a year, that is a great danger to what we do, because not only are they constantly awake or in a heightened state while they're on duty, they don't get a good rest period. They're there 24/48. They don't have the ability to rehab in between calls. They're also, putting themselves in a lot of danger. And we say, oh, well, the fire is the only danger. Actually, the most important danger, they're probably one of the highest dangers that we face is every time we roll out of that station with those lights and sirens on. So that's the 25,000 calls or the 23,500 calls, not just the 100 or 150 that were there. So what we need to do is we need to look at additional personnel, one, to first bring us up to a full staffing level, or for what we're at as far as the number of seats that are in our apparatus, we're not at a full staffing level. What that means is when we're not at full staffing level, when we have people off on their normal scheduled leave, and we have people off on sick leave, FMLA, work comp, that takes us into overtime a lot faster, which that tends to, again, stress the other firefighters because they're compensating for that difference. We need to look how to solve some of our issues that are involved with EMS. That may be looking at an alternative type service, using pickup trucks with maybe 2 people. It may be looking at a paramedical program in coordination with that, which also can be used in outreach as part of a co-responder type of program. We need to bring our administrative staff back up to the levels to have a good, safe level and span of control. But again, more importantly, it's getting us to a level that our people are safe out there when they're on the road. I believe that answered the questions that were asked, with the exception of some questions in regards to the ballot information itself, which the city manager will have to answer those. But I'm open to any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Are there comments or questions from the council for Chief Short?
Madam Mayor.
Yes,
Madam
Councilman Steinmeier.
Chief, appreciate you giving us the report. You said it's $500 to $500 per square foot to build, remodel, replace?
To build a new, right now,
okay.
commercial building is going on
What's the average size that we're talking about?
about a 10,000 square foot
10,000
station. That's
square feet.
pretty normal for, and that is the equivalent of the 2 stations, the last two stations that we built.
The response time over 9 minutes, you're saying right now?
Yes.
Now that
90th
we've-
percentile.
Okay, so now that we've expanded out in the 3rd district, a multi-use apartments, do you think we need to approach or discuss the idea that we need to build something in that area? Now that we're mixing retail and residential?
That is one area of our city, but it is not the only area of our city that needs to be looked at. Current locations and the way we're providing a response to that area.
Well,
But yes, does that increase make a difference? Sure.
it's most important
Yeah.
area in our city.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear.
To me, all of it is.
Well, I
understand
understand what you're
I
saying.
I understand your stance, but to me, all of it's important.
Yeah, so it's obviously a money issue, and there's money owed out there, so we need to approach that too. We'll have a discussion on that. But I would like to know if you could help us and bring some input as to where would be an ideal location, something we need to talk about, if we need to do a study on it. I think we've got to prepare for it. We've changed the zoning. We need to start talking about it.
I mean, we definitely need to consider doing a deployment study. It has been put in the budget. I'm very comfortable in my position in understanding my job to know that there's a need there. However, we seem to be more comfortable with outside people doing studies to tell us that. So if we need to do a deployment study, we'll do a deployment study. But I can pretty much tell you that, yes, we probably need to have a station in that area as well.
Yeah. And would you be opposed if we did like a police substation as a part of that complex as well?
If that's what you would like to do, we can do that.
That's what I would love to do.
That was a proposal when the MCI was done, was to make a combination police station and fire station to be put out near Center Point. That building went to the dispatch center at MCI.
Yeah. So, Madam Mayor, I would like to maybe ask the city manager in the next study session or two that we begin to have a dialogue on that and bring the fire department in and begin to talk about what, where, when, how much, and how we're going to go after those funds, if you're okay with something like that.
You're the
Madam
governing
City
body,
Clerk,
you tell me.
according to our new rules of procedure, do you want a vote on giving direction to the city manager to conduct that research?
Those rules actually don't go into effect until next week.
Okay, well,
I
good.
just eked it in then, didn't I?
Yeah,
There
you
you go.
did.
All right.
Does anybody have any objection to giving that direction to the city manager to explore that?
Madam
Okay,
Mayor,
yes.
just for clarification, direction to the city manager to explore fire station deployments.
Deployment?
Deployment cost and,
Yeah.
and where we're gonna come up with the money. I have some brilliant ideas.
Okay.
It'll be one you've all heard before, so. That's all.
Councilmember DeLucci, I'm sorry, should you guys read this?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I wonder, Chief, do you know how much will be raised if we raise our fire tax from 1/8 of a cent to 1/2 of a cent?
Currently, our 1/8 of a percent brings in approximately 2.1 million. Therefore, if we go to a half cent, it will be at 8.4. That, of course, could be a number that gets smaller or gets larger based on local purchasing, because it's not involved in the use tax.
And what two stations are you looking at replacing, Chief?
Station 5 and Station 8 are two immediate needs that we have.
And then you mentioned repairing 3 stations within the next 10 years. What stations are they?
That's Station 6, 9, and 10.
And how much is full staffing level? I don't know what number you're talking about increasing the staffing level.
To take us back to just get us where we're at existing apparatus, to get us to full staffing would take us at least 12 personnel. And that doesn't include adding any additional, whether it be adding a new station or whether it's adding a different model to what we do.
Okay, so you're saying, like, for example, and I'm making these numbers up, so everybody's clear about that. If it takes 6 gentlemen or firefighters, I apologize, to run a call, you might be running right now with 4. And what you need is the additional money to hire those other 2 in order for that fire call to be fully staffed at 6. Is that what you're saying?
It's to make sure that, yes, we have the correct number of people on the apparatus without having to burden the extra overtime just to get to it.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Councilman Huff?
Yes, read an article in the newspaper the other day about we need better city services and what are we getting for our money. It was in the opinion page. But part of my deal here is it sounds like to me the last time we had a study on this was 1991. Is that correct? I mean, we do.
I don't even know that there was a study done back then. There was a study done in 2009 that involved EMS that we did not act on.
Right. According to this article, there's not been any population change. If nothing else, it's decreased other than in District 3, and we know what's going on out there. My biggest deal out there is we do studies for parking vehicles in a building. We do traffic studies. I'm trying to figure out why we didn't have a study on fire department or police out in that area. If we can't reach the buildings to get people, if the buildings are on fire, I'm kind of lost on. So,
well, as far as when those buildings go up, the fire code does address things that we are a part of making that decision on.
And you said their insurance goes sky high because of all kinds of different things.
Sure. Currently, I'll use ISO as our rating. We're a 2. The highest rating is a 10. If most people will see the greatest lowering of their residential somewhere between that 8 and the 4. And then 4 below directly affects commercial properties. Now, not everybody uses ISO, but they still use the same measurements that are very similar to ISO, which is evaluating the number of personnel, evaluating water supply inside of our city, evaluating the losses that have occurred inside of our city. So they're all calculated in a very similar way.
Right, so, do we need a study out there or something to see what we got going out in these areas? We're talking a lot of money here.
I mean, like I said, I'm very confident and I could pull all the data together to tell you what we need.
Right, and so.
But that would be up to you to decide if you want to take that.
And then, we're already talking about the amount. Do we have an amount of money that we're not putting out there, getting too much or too little? I mean, I guess law prohibits us from going so high, but this just seems crazy to me. We're doing something, we have no study, we have no pricing, no studies. I mean, I have no idea what this is going to cost other than what you're saying, $550 per foot, and we don't have a location or anything like that. I'm just wondering about that. And another thing would be, I'd like to address, which is there a sunset on this? I didn't see anything in here at all.
There is not a sunset on the proposed ordinance, and that was something that I know has been discussed. The reason being that this funds personnel, and were this to sunset, it would, and not be renewed, then we would find ourselves in a position where we would not have funding for the personnel who are funded through this tax. I also understand in our previous presentation from the chief and conversations that the cost per station will take several years of this tax, and Chief, I'm sure you can elaborate on this, in order to acquire the funding necessary for each station. And I think you told me, what, like 3 or 4 years of approximately of this tax collection divided for the purpose to construct one station. So if there were a sunset, we would be limited in planning for these capital expenses to build or relocate new stations were the tax not to be renewed.
Well, I'm just having a hard time that I know we have some problems. You've been talking to us for over a year, maybe more than that, and I have no problem. I realize y'all need money and everything out there to operate. I'm just really confused on why this is such a rush deal. We're not getting any studies or any. I mean, I know nothing. I'm throwing something out here on a ballot that I have no clue. So I'm sure the public has no clue. I'm just a little confused on what's the hurry here without, I mean, like I said, we do parking lot studies and traffic studies, but we don't do a fire study of any type or any kind of idea what we're going to spend to renew a fire station, redo it. I mean, I realize prices change daily, but at least some kind of a ballpark. We're just going out here saying, hey, let's go hit the taxpayers again for some more money, and we have no direction. We're going like this is my only thing. I don't know. I'm just a little confused.
Any other comments or questions for the chief?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Steinmeier.
Just to kind of go off of that, we're at 1/8 of a cent currently.
That is correct.
We came to 0.5%. I mean, this is what we're going to ask for.
Right.
So about a $6.3 million increase a year in revenue.
That's correct.
How did we come up with from 1/8 to 1/2?
Okay, so as we look at that 1/8 to the 1/2, what we're looking at is, by the way that ordinance is written, we utilize a quarter of that will be for the capital. Kind of takes us back to where we started in 2004. But it also gives us room to build stations. One station we can't build with 1 year of tax. That would take us 2 to 3 years of that tax to be able to afford it. Sure, we can bond it out and build it, but it's still going to take us 2 to 3 years for each station to pay it off. And then the other quarter cent is for the personnel part of it.
I'm good. I'm comfortable with that. I think what Councilmember Huff was getting at is did we have a formula that we had off of anything that we've done in terms of study or that you brought forward that says we need to go from an eighth to a half a cent?
I can go back to the last 3 budget presentations that I presented to the mayor, or excuse me, to the city manager, and explaining the need that we had with the fire department. However, I trust it's up to him to make that decision, what goes forward and what does not.
I understand. Sometimes we're just not privileged to those discussions. So that, and since we're going to take it to the voters, I want them to be clear how we came from an eighth to a half.
So
Anything we can do to enlighten them or give them more information so they can make a good informed voting decision, I think we owe it to them to do so.
And I agree with you, and I would never hold it back from any question that would ever be asked of me in that case.
Chief, maybe you could talk about the change in state statute that occurred a couple of years ago that allows us to go to implement a half cent.
Yeah, when we first got into the sales tax in 2004, the actual 2 different sales tax for public safety are under 2 different statutes with the state. The public safety sales tax for police department is in the 70 series of the sales tax and authority of the city, and they were limited to an eighth of a cent. The sales tax for the fire departments are in the 321 series, which mostly involves fire districts, but it also includes some municipalities in there. At the time, the limit or the limit to that sales tax was at a quarter of a cent. It also is very specific in the areas of the state that it can go to, doing their picking and choosing the way they do. We just happen to be, as Jackson County, in one of those areas. In 2019, Senator Rizzo proposed for one of those areas, which just happens to be Jackson County, to have that increase, to take that increase to a half cent. This is to provide for not only the fire districts who are in Jackson County, but it was also to provide an ability for revenue for the Kansas City Fire Department municipally, Sugar Creek municipally, who all went for that and passed the tax.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for the chief?
Madam Mayor, I do have a question, I think for the city manager.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager, I'm just curious, would this ordinance reduce the amount of funding to the fire department from the general fund?
No, it
Or
would.
would this be in addition?
No, this would be strictly increasing the total amount being collected by the fire sales tax. It would not have an impact on the amount flowing to the general fund.
And can you give us a ballpark, because I don't have my budget book? How much money right now do we spend from the general fund for both fire and police?
Fire is about 30% of the general fund budget, and police is about 42%.
Can you give me numbers, like in terms of dollars, or?
If you can let me get my calculator out.
I would, thank you so much. I don't have a calculator here.
It's a little over 23 million.
The police or fire department's about 23 million, and the police department's about another 31 million.
And so this ordinance would increase the firefighters from 23 million, an additional 8.4 million?
No, because the fire sales tax is separate from the general fund. So
Okay.
the fire sales tax, what'd you say, Chief's about
2.1 a year.
2.1 a year?
This year was higher because we have another large apparatus to purchase
Yeah.
that we took out of our unassigned balance.
So this would increase the amount of revenue collected by the fire sales tax from about 2.1 million to about 8.5, 8.4.
And would that 8.4 be added to the 23 million that we're already giving them?
Correct. But that's, right now you've got the 2.1 in addition to the 23 million.
Okay, so really it's 21 million plus 8.4.
Well, no, it's 23 million plus 2, so more about 25.
Oh, okay. And then the police is 31 million we're giving, and they're asking for an additional 4 million from the use tax plus their portion of the waterfall, correct?
So the police is about 31 million in the general fund. They received 3.75 million from the, pardon me, I back up, 3 million. 3 million from the use tax right now. So that gets you up to about 34 million. They're looking to increase that. If that was placed before the voters and approved, that would add another $1 million, which gets you about to 35. Plus their a shade over $2 million that they get for the police sales tax, public safety sales tax.
Am I correct in thinking that neither one of these ordinances would reduce the funding from other sources of the city to either department?
No, there's not a budget reduction contemplated, no. I want to make sure I understood your question, but no, budget reduction is not contemplated as part of that. These would be additional resources to support both of those departments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so I want to just make a point. The City Council approves a budget that is presented by the city manager out of general fund revenue that is allocated to the various departments of the city. Voter-approved taxes are beyond our ability to utilize those for any purpose other than what is intended. So I'm just, Councilmember DeLucia, I just want to, some of the terminology is just, I want to be clear that, this isn't money that we're giving to the fire department. This is money, or the police department, or the streets department, or the parks department. This is money that the community has said needs to be invested for these specific purposes. And they are willing to tax themselves to ensure that the city council and the city manager direct those funds to where they are intended. So I think, in my way of looking at it, I don't view it as we're increasing the fire department budget from 23 million by $8 million. This is a decision for the voters to decide, is this how they want to dedicate their money through their taxes that they pay to support something that's important to them for the quality of life and safety of the community. So I know I'm splitting hairs a bit, but I want to be clear that we understand that this is a decision of the community for the community. The general fund dollars are, certainly those are always, the community doesn't have necessarily a say in how those are allocated other than by electing a city council who then in turn appoints a city manager. But these dollars are separated, and so I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay, next on the agenda is the local public health order. I had requested that this be on the agenda for this evening based on the desire of the council to have some discussion on the local public health order. By way of just some recapping, we issued a local public health order when we, the City of Independence, were recognized by the state of Missouri as a local public health authority. That occurred, I think, officially in January. Up until that point, we were under the local health order of the Jackson County Health Department. And when we received that designation from the state, we were then required to issue our own local public health order under the state of emergency of the global pandemic, COVID-19. Part of that local health order is that we review that every 30 days. That was something that we imposed upon ourselves, that would be reviewed every 30 days. And that has been consistent, and changes have been made over the course of the last many months to the local public health order. On July 9th, we issued a public health advisory based on updated information and guidance from the Center for Disease Control, which recommended wearing masks even for unvaccinated people. We also included some some suggestions about social distancing and avoiding crowds and those types of things. On July 28th, we took that advisory and incorporated it into the health order as recommendations. There was nothing that was required in the health order that was different from the health advisory, other than some restrictions for city facilities, city staff and volunteers, boards and commissions. On August 2nd, we had a council meeting where a special meeting was called to discuss that. So on August 3rd, we rescinded those portions of the public health order. We still have the public health advisory in place, which recommends wearing masks indoors regardless of your vaccination status. That's the key point of that. So some questions ensued about how we issue a public health order, what the state statute requires, which is known as House Bill 571, which was passed by the General Assembly and adopted by emergency, by the governor, signed that, and that is the law of the land. The state statute in a nutshell says that given the authority provided through our city charter, that a local health order can be issued, but in order for it to be extended past 90 days, that a majority support of the council would be required at the point that that health order is in place for 30 days, that it would need approval of the council, in this case, to be extended beyond 30 days. And Mr. City Manager, I believe that's allowable up to 3 times?
I'm going to have the attorney clarify
Yeah.
that. We asked him that today.
Yeah, if you could clarify the statute.
Yeah, it says that it can be extended or approved not to exceed 30 calendar days in duration, and any order may extend it more than once, remain in effect for longer. Let's see here. Then a 180-day period. That's correct. So you can keep going for extending every 30 days up to 180 days.
Okay,
Yes.
and no longer.
And no longer.
And once you reach, if it's the desire of the council or the governing majority of the governing body to extend it, then that is limited to 180 days from the time that it is issued. Their state statute overrides our charter. The charter gives authority to the mayor under the state of emergency, but the state statute overrides the charter, requiring that it does require council approval after 30 days. So we will be reviewing the local health order tomorrow or the next day in accordance with our ordinance that requires that to be done every 30 days. That is on the 11th of every month. Sometimes we do it sooner, as we did on July 28th, given changing circumstances, but it's done a minimum of at least every 30 days. Some good news to share is that we have been encouraging people in our community to be vaccinated, and we have seen a significant increase in vaccines this past week. We had been averaging about 50 vaccinations per week that were administered by our health department, and this past week we did 230 vaccinations. So that is a remarkable and significant increase, and something that is very good news. We are continuing to have vaccination clinics 5 days a week to provide people with those opportunities. And I'm just going to share, if I can find it, what those vaccine opportunities are for this week. So tomorrow, August 10th, from 10 a.m. to 12:30, we will be at Pleasant Heights. There will be offered the J&J as well as the Pfizer vaccine. It's a walk-up, no registration is required. Wednesday, we will be at Lunch Partners, as we have been every single week. That is from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, and that is the J&J single shot. August 13th, we will be at the Independence Utility Center from 12 to 4. J&J and Pfizer will both be offered. Again, this is a walk-up, no registration required. Thursday, I'm going out of order, that was Friday. Thursday, August 12th, we'll be at the Moonlight Movies from 7 to 9 p.m. as we have been throughout the summer. There will be all three vaccines available, J&J, Moderna, and Pfizer. And then on August 14th, which is Saturday, from 8 to noon, we will be partnering with the Community Services League and their Back to School Fair, and that will be at the Nolan Road office here near City Hall. That will be the Pfizer vaccine that will be available. August 18th, we'll be at the Villages at Jackson Creek from 1 to 4 p.m. with all three vaccines available. And then we have some others that are scheduled a little bit further out, including during Santa Calagon. We will have the opportunity from noon to 6 p.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then 12 to 4 on Monday. I don't know precisely where that's going to be located during Santa Calagon, but we will have all three shots available during those times as well. So that's the good news. The bad news is I believe some of the council members were able to join the meeting that was called on Friday with the regional medical directors of the various hospitals in our hospital systems in our region. So these are the chief medical officers from Truman Medical Center, HCA, St. Luke's, Children's Mercy, KU Med, all of the medical facilities, hospitals that serve Independence, Jackson County, Kansas, our region, 9-county metropolitan region. The message was consistently urgent that the hospitals are under enormous strain. ICUs are full. Ventilators are nearing not having any available. They are turning people away who should be in the hospital because they simply don't have any capacity. Those are people with COVID or people with other illnesses and diseases who should be in the hospital. They're not to the point, some of this is caused by deferred medical care that occurred during COVID when hospitals were not doing any elective or non-emergency type of procedures. And people simply just were not getting out and going to the doctor for regular routine medical treatment and evaluation. So we are seeing a very, very serious situation. In all cases, those who are hospitalized right now with COVID are not vaccinated. So that is why we have been pushing so strongly for people to get vaccinated, making all of the variety of vaccines available to people, and we are making tremendous progress, as you can tell from our increase in vaccines that we were able to administer this past week. Chief Short, showed up at 5 a.m. at a local business to vaccinate their employees on his own time with some of our volunteers. So we'll go anywhere, anytime, any place to help people to access this life-saving vaccine. So our situation certainly is dire and it is worsening. And I don't believe that there is any dispute about that based on the information that we received from the chief medical officers from across our region on Friday. That was recorded. I think it's widely available. If you want to look for it out on the internet, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you're likely to find it, and I encourage you to watch it for yourselves and understand the situation that we are dealing with. So I wanted to give that overview, and as the council requested, open this up to discussion regarding Independence's local health order. So are there comments or questions? Councilman Hobart, I see your lips moving, but I don't hear you. So, no. Are you muted? No. No. So I wanted to clarify, first of all, the process, because I think there was some, I think we got you now. I think there was some misunderstanding about at what point the council is required to or given the opportunity to vote on the local health order, and that is not at the implementation, it's at the 30-day mark, whether or not it were to be extended. Okay, Councilman Hobart, I think we have you back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. I wanted to ask if we could hear, like if we could schedule Christina Heinen to come in and give a presentation. I don't know if it's a study session or something else. And also ask our Board of Health to, give their opinion on this issue. I think it might be helpful to hear from some local folks too.
So Christina Heinen is here. Mr. City Manager, if you would like to have Christina come up.
Yeah, we can go ahead and make Christina available tonight if there's any questions of her.
Okay.
I know our next study session's in 2 weeks, so
yeah,
we're here.
Okay, Christina, here you are.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Christina Heinen. I'm the Health and Animal Services Director for the City of Independence. An update for you guys tonight on COVID. We are seeing an increase in numbers in our area. Probably beginning of June, we were averaging about 10 to maybe 15 new cases a day among our population. Beginning of July, we were seeing closer to about 20 new cases per day. As of right now, we're seeing right around 70 new cases every single day among our population. We're seeing the largest jump in those that are 25 to 44, I believe, that age bracket, though we're seeing an increase, of course, in all different ages. As the mayor shared, the chief medical officers shared what was going on this last week. I know Dr. Daryl Nelson, who's with Centerpoint, shared that HCA hospitals are 94% capacity for all beds, 95% capacity for all ICU. We are, of course, deeply concerned about that. We have many options, and I'm more than willing to call for our Board of Health members to hold a special session if you would like to discuss further.
Okay, are there any questions for Christina?
No, I would, oh, Madam Mayor, real briefly, I would like to, I'd like to ask Christina to do that, because I think all the local voices we can hear would be helpful to our citizens.
So, Councilman Hobart, may I ask, is there something specific that you would like for the Advisory Board of Health to advise us on? Are you just to make them aware of the situation, or to bring back a recommendation or opinion to the council about what measures we may consider taking?
Thank you, Mayor, for clarifying. No, I think I'd like to have a recommendation from them on steps, you know, best practices, so to speak. What should we be doing as a city and as a city council, what we can do to help combat this situation?
To reiterate, clearly the direction from the chief medical officers, and they had some nice graphics about, you know, slices of Swiss cheese with the holes getting progressively smaller and further apart. Vaccines, masks, social distancing, staying home when you're sick, getting tested, washing your hands, staying out of crowds, the same things that we've been saying since March of 2019, except now we can say vaccine is available, where for all those months when we were under strict restrictions, it was not. So those are the mitigation steps. And as I say, our incident command team meets weekly. It used to be daily, then it was every couple times a week. Now it's weekly, to be updated on this and make decisions regarding our local health order, and importantly, how that local health order is enforced.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I appreciate that, and I agree with what you said for sure. Because I'm sure that the health order will be under, let me rephrase. This is an incredibly divisive issue, as I've heard, as my inbox has filled up as I've been out of town this last week. And for me, it would be helpful to hear, in addition to the local hospital directors, from our local guys. You know, Dr. Morris is great and is a retired physician and has been in Independence forever. And I think as we're going forward, because I'm sure that the council will review whatever health orders, and I'm sure this will be a continuing issue. I thought it might be helpful to hear from our Board of Health on this too. That's all. That was really my thought.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I would like, if we're going to ask the Board of Health to look into this, I would like to know, of these hospitalizations, how much are imported people from Springfield? And are they imported with COVID or other things? And I'd also like to know what variant of COVID we're talking about. Are they vaccinated or not? What is their idea as to our status of the state of emergency? We've been under it for a very long time, and I wonder, when in God's name are we going to get out of it? So, you know, to say our hospitals are overflowing sounds awful, but what does that mean? And so I would like a factual look at our situation.
Christina, do you have any information you can share on that?
What I can share, I can get more direct information from Dr. Nelson, who serves on our board. However, my understanding from the Chief Medical Officer brief is that very, very few patients are coming up from Springfield. They do not have room for transfers at this time. So the majority of cases that they're seeing are from our region. They are from right here. I know that our water sewer shed program, where they're going in and they're testing our different sewer systems, not only at Rock Creek, but Little Blue Valley, they're seeing 100% of the sewer shed analysis is showing Delta. That is what is moving through our area. They are not picking up other variants right now. Independence is seeing Delta.
Mr. City Manager, and I see the chief making his way up here, and you may call on him if you choose.
Just to
I
give
would
you
like
one
to-
more example of what's going on, council member. As you've probably seen a couple weeks ago, the state assigned a ambulance strike team to Springfield because they were so overwhelmed to help get those people out to other areas. Most of them didn't come to Kansas City. As of yesterday, a strike team has been assigned to the Kansas City area because we are now getting so overwhelmed that we're going to have to start outsourcing those patients.
Mr. City Manager, Chief, you might not want to go too far because this might get directed to you. There's certain reasons why we continue to be under a state of emergency. Staying under a state of emergency allows us to do certain things. So, Mr. City Manager, would you like to elaborate on that, or ask the chief to elaborate on why we continue to be under a state of emergency?
Sure. The state of emergency is a recognition of some sort of disaster, whether natural or man-made or whatever, that is occurring within a region and allows certain purchasing privileges that normally don't exist, even if we have to make emergency purchases, et cetera. It allows for the recoupment of costs associated with response to that. That, again, is just mostly a recognition of the disaster that's unfolding in an area and allows that entity, in this case the City of Independence, to deploy resources more freely and to recover costs associated with that deployment. The public health order is the mechanism through which the various restrictions are handed down, if you will. So mask mandates, closing of businesses' hours, reduced hours, gathering limitations, et cetera, that all comes through a public health order.
So can you give some examples of some things some expenditures that we are making that are reimbursable due to being under the state of emergency?
Chief, you've been collecting this data for us. Would you go ahead?
Sure. I mean, just one good example is currently the fire department is handling the homebound vaccination program for the City of Independence, which means that we provide some of our medical staff to go out to the homebound, to go do some of the mobile clinics, to go out there to provide that. We have volunteers, but we still, are limited with those volunteers. So it's important for us. We currently have a grant that is specific to being able to do that. And that grant's only there because of the state of the emergency. And everything that we do has to be related to that in order to get that reimbursement. Another example is a lot of the things that we did when we stood up our clinic. Those are also coverages that allowed us to go out there and provide that clinic to provide a large amount of vaccinations, but still recover some of our costs that we have in that. It'll also, when it gets down to the PA or the public assistance, a lot of our costs, overtime costs, whether it was fire department, police department, street department, IPL, all of them that had COVID-related costs overtime because one person went into quarantine, which caused 4 others to do it because they came in sick or they're not vaccinated. Those can be recovered from that. So, again, do we have to recover it? No, but then we're right back in the same general fund question we always have. Where's it coming from? This allows us that ability to be able to recover it. Another important reason to have an emergency, it allows for resource sharing. In other words, whether, we're not the only ones having this issue. This is statewide, nationwide. So in this case, the ambulance strike team that's being brought into the metro area, it's not because our ambulances that we have in the City of Independence or the Kansas City metro area, couldn't put together a strike team. It's that they're beyond their resources now. So we're drawing from an area that maybe isn't as involved in the same type of situation that we are. They don't have the increase that we have right now. But in time, what we'll see is that resource sharing is a mutual sharing, which means that we might have to go and do the same thing somewhere else to help them out. Happens a lot in the fire service, happens a lot through our utilities. Do that a lot. It's resource sharing, and it's all because of that emergency declaration. We have the ability to do that.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any other
Just-
questions? Yes.
Just a
Councilmember
few more
DeLucy.
questions, Madam Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious if the Board of Health could give us a number. I'm curious as to the number of vaccinated people within the City of Independence. I'm curious on the number of beds at ICU that really are COVID-related beds. And I have a question for the lawyer, if he could answer it. Isn't it true that House Bill 271 allows the board, the governing board of a governmental body to terminate a health order at any time? We don't have to wait 30 days?
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Cover.
Well, I don't know which section that might be in.
Section 3. I would appreciate it, sir, if you could take a look at it and let us know when the Board of Health meets, hopefully. So they'll have that information too. I think that's important information to have.
Will do.
Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor,
Yes. Councilman Steinmeier?
are we utilizing the rapid tests if we have city employees, police who are stretched thin now? Are we doing rapid tests? Are we just doing a test, putting them into quarantine for the traditional 2 weeks? How are we handling that now?
I'll ask Christina Heinen to explain our process.
So we do have access to some rapid tests, and those have been offered up. I've talked to multiple directors, multiple staff members about those. They also have the option of going to CVS or Walgreens. Many of those also offer rapid tests. The issue with rapid tests is some of them are just not as reliable or as accurate as some of the PCR tests that take just a little bit longer. It's going to take longer than 15 minutes to get your answer. If someone is showing symptoms, we highly encourage them to get tested. However, it's not a requirement. At least I have not forced any staff member to go get tested. Quarantine is strictly used for when those individuals have been exposed to someone who's had that definite positive exposure. And so those people, we follow the CDC guidelines on quarantine.
So they're doing 10 days?
Quarantine is
2
14
weeks?
days.
So we've had shifts that have been quarantined for 14 days,
And many of those people have been positive during that time.
many being how many out of a shift? 'Cause I've heard it's maybe 1 or 2.
There were at least 6 I know of that came from that group that ended up being positive.
Okay. So would you agree that some of the tests, because I had a family member who went and was tested, and she tested positive, and then went and got a home kit immediately, tested negative, went and got a rapid test, tested negative. 3 days later, tested again, tested negative. But she, according to the county, was a positive test. These are not 100% tests. Would you agree with that?
No test is 100%. The viral threshold, though, is set to give you a much higher likelihood of having a false negative than ever having a false positive.
So 3 false negatives on the false or on a positive, you would consider those false negatives, all 3?
Very possibly.
Okay.
Mr. Cover, did you find the section?
Well, yes, I found it. I'm a little, the wording here is, it matters, and that's why I'm trying to read through it. The section I think that Councilwoman DeLucy is referring to says, the governing bodies of the political subdivisions issuing orders under this section shall at all times have the authority to terminate an order issued or extended under this section upon a simple majority of the body. So, but the reason that's not as clear as that may imply is because if it's an order issued by the body, then absolutely. But what is contemplated here is an order issued by the mayor in this case, which is not the body, and so that's why it's not as clear as it may otherwise seem.
Thank you.
So that's why I'm still
Okay,
reading.
well, we'll keep evaluating that,
Yes-
but
yes,
thank
ma'am.
you for finding that for us. Other comments or questions on the local health order? Okay, thank you. Our next report is on boards and commissions. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you. We have two boards that we're looking for reappointment resolutions. The first is the Mayor Advisory Commission on the Arts. Mayor Weir is recommending reappointing Nancy Eppert and Monica Kettenhoffen. If there's no objections, we'll add a resolution to the next agenda.
Are there any objections? Okay,
And next is the Housing Authority. Mayor Weir is suggesting reappointing Herbert Bankston Jr. and Lynn Rose. If there's no objections, we'll add a resolution to the next agenda.
are there any objections? Okay, listed in your report are also some individual council member appointment vacancies that need to be filled. Lastly, this evening on boards and commissions report is the city clerk is seeking direction from the council on how to proceed with the individual appointments order of in which those would be assigned. So, Madam City Clerk.
Yeah, so we can either do it tonight or we can wait until the next regular meeting, but we need to assign Planning Commission, TIF Commission, and PUAB members to their respective council members.
So is it the desire of the council for the city clerk to do that random assignment tonight, or would you prefer to wait till the next meeting?
I move to have it at the next meeting.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
I don't believe, Madam Mayor, that we can have a vote in a study session.
All right, our new
That's
rules
right.
have not gone into effect. Is there any objection? So I'm sorry, rescind your motion. Is there any objection to putting this on for the next meeting? Okay, very good. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
I just want to make sure, did we get the direction to take the public health order to the Board of Health for review and recommendations?
No,
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
no, there was a request that we look into that, so, okay. All right, then we are adjourned.